Attention denizens of planet Earth.
Broadcasting from Carbondale in Southern Illinois' premier comic shop. And now your host, superlative shaman of comic book knowledge, Dan Brown. Flash the match signal in case of emergency for your host with the most on his mind, Matt Morton. Watch out, criminals. There's nothing funny to him about truth, justice, and the American way. It's Commander Harris himself, Scott Reed. And tuning in from the far reaches of no man's land, the mad scientist dream leader, Mike New. This is Campus Comics Cast.
So, despite what our lengthy roll call on the theme song just told you, this installment of the Campus Comics Cast is starring Dan Brown and
Scott Reed.
And that's it. But that's all you really need, isn't it, when you stop and think about it? So, this episode, we're going to be, it's not a regular previews episode. We're going to talk about some other, comics and news and things kind of going on. Just me and Scott right now coming to you from Campus Comics at 816 East Main Street, Suite B in Carbondale, Illinois. We're here every Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 6. If you want to get a hold of us, number 618-457-6011, or you can find us on Facebook and Twitter. We got some events coming up. We have Batman Day coming up this Saturday, September 21st in store, and then next weekend, the weekend after that, will be the Saluki Comic Con in Carbondale, which Campus Comics will be there, and
Bird Comics will be there as well.
So come see us there. We'll have some more details about Batman Day later in the episode, so stay tuned.
And, of course, you can find the info on the Campus Comics Facebook page.
Yeah. And so I think right now me and Scott are going to look at a book we've mentioned we were going to go over previously, Spider-Man Life Story. What do you think of the book, Scott?
Well, I think it was overhyped to me.
Really?
Yeah. So I had a lot of people tell me that they just really, really loved this book, and I guess I built it up a little bit too much in my mind. Mm-hmm. So whenever I actually sat down and read it, I was a little disappointed.
Okay.
So I don't know. I won't go into details about that yet, but initially it was a bit of a letdown for me. And I read all 6 issues basically within a 24-hour period. Mm-hmm. So but still, I was a little bit let down because it wasn't what I wanted.
Would you have enjoyed it more? You think if your expectations hadn't been raised like that?
It's even without the expectation of it being like super super good, mm-hmm. my personal expectation was for something a little bit different than what we got. Okay. And so I think I still would have been disappointed in it.
Okay. Well, the conceit of the story is, if you don't know, and again, spoilers from here on out. Yeah. If you haven't read this and you don't want spoilers, fast forward. Because we're going to be talking about this. This miniseries just wrapped up. So it's a 6-issue miniseries by Chip Zdarsky and Mark Bagley and John Dell. And so it's Spider-Man sort of aging in real time. Right. Starting in the 60s, going through the 70s, 80s, 90s to today. Each issue takes place in a separate decade of his life. And so you see Spider-Man in his foes' age, kids being born, people dying, actual consequences, and you've got, some sort of real-life world events going on at the same time. You have the Vietnam War and different things, and sort of how the Marvel Universe reacts to that. But you also have these sort of classic Spider-Man stories sprinkled in through the appropriate decades, too, of when they originally took place. So the first issue is the 60s.
So this one takes place 4 years right after he becomes Spider-Man.
I think so, it's 1966.
So he's 19 in this story. That's how I took it.
Because I think it says he's in college at this point when the story starts here.
Yeah, I think it said in the title blurb or whatever that he was 15 when he got bit. So
something like that.
And one of the first things it says is that 4 years ago I was bit or whatever. Yeah. So he's basically 19 years old at this point.
Yeah, and so the thing with this issue is the Vietnam War is going on. Mm-hmm. A lot of superheroes are getting involved. Word on the street is Captain America going to get involved with Vietnam. Again, something they really didn't address too much back in the day, in the actual contemporary comics of the day. But there's the storyline of Flash Thompson is going off to war,
which he did in the original stories as well. At some point, he went to war. I can't remember exactly when, but at some point, he actually does go in the comics.
Yeah, right. But Peter is wrestling with, should Spider-Man get involved? Mm-hmm. Should I go over and fight this war?
And will he have to reveal his secret identity to do it?
Yeah. And so you have him kind of struggling with this, and then you have Norman Osborn as the Green Goblin lashing out, and sort of the fallout from that. But, Spider-Man meets up with Captain America, who is supposed to be going off to war, and just asks him, should I do this? And Cap tells him, responsibility doesn't mean everything's on a global scale like that. He's the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
Yeah, not the friendly global Spider-Man.
So here at the end of this first issue, we've got Cap in Vietnam a year later, and he's sort of appears at this cliffhanger to sort of be working against the U.S. troops. Right. We find out later he's kind of working with both sides.
Exactly. Which this was okay. This is one of the first issues that I had with the book, is that they have events like this and they really don't resolve them. So you have the thing with Cap, and I don't feel like it got fully resolved. And you have some stuff with some of the other even some of the storylines with some of the characters, they don't feel like they get fully resolved. To me, this needed to either be a much longer series, or it needed to be I don't know, a little less, try to cover as much of the Marvel Universe as it did.
I feel like that's one of the drawbacks to the format they're doing here. When you have a story where each issue set in a different decade, unless you're doing something on December 31st, 9 of that decade, you can't have a cliffhanger going into the next issue. This totally plays like a cliffhanger. Like, what's going on with Cap? That's not gonna be resolved. That'll be resolved off the page.
Right.
They make reference to it later in the book, but you don't get the traditional cliffhangers with this story.
I just felt like that a few more pages to each issue, and they could have at least done some exposition or some, had some of the flashback type of things where, Peter encounters something the decade later that reminds him about what happened, and could have resolved some of those storylines. I just feel like so many of those storylines just are unresolved. And I know that, and like you said, it is the drawback of a decade per issue, but I don't know. It just felt incomplete.
I will say I am surprised, knowing Marvel, that this wasn't a 12-issue series at least, or something like that, because I think it is a solid story. But again, you're going the decade by decade, and again, Cap in Vietnam comes up again later in the story, but it's never the focus of the story. No. This is Spider-Man's story. And so you're sort of getting things as they're occurring, around him, and we're sort of in and out of different stories like that.
So yeah, and in that, one thing I think that's important to talk about, like on these books, is like the covers. So like the covers of each one, kind of has a Spider-Man scene and a lot of times it has something, like the politics or the event that's going on.
Yeah.
So like the cover of issue 1 is Spider-Man web swinging off of helicopters, which is the whole reference to Vietnam.
Yeah, it's Vietnam era.
So I think I do really enjoy the covers of all of these issues.
Covers are great.
Yeah, these are the covers are outstanding. So it's just one of those things. So now the cover to the second one.
I love this cover.
That's a really so here we're at the 70s. So we got the disco ball, right? Which has one of Green Goblin's jack-o'-lanterns, or pumpkin grenades, I guess I should say. Yeah. But you also have with Spider-Man, it implies it's that whole Gwen Stacy scene with him holding, on the bridge, holding up above, and then has the web holding down because he's actually holding up the disco ball. That's not what we get. But that was the implication that I had from this cover.
That's one of the big things that's not in this story.
Right.
That's one of the major points this deviates from is, because of the events in the last issue, Green Goblin's locked up in the 70s. So you don't get him throwing Gwen Stacy off the bridge and all that. That doesn't happen. But Gwen Stacy's in here. Yep. And her and Peter end up working for Professor, is it Warren, I think? The guy that clones him. We all know from the Clone Saga.
Because Peter's working for Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And this is just one of those things where to me, this is my big complaint, is this felt like an Elseworlds or a What If story.
Oh, for sure.
And I really feel like they could have what I wanted was to see this story as the events that unfolded in the actual comic, how they would have played out with an aging Peter Parker, not a perpetually young Peter Parker. And I felt like what we got instead was this what if story. So what if Peter Parker actually aged, as opposed to how did Spider-Man handle all those events as if he had actually aged. So it's just a little nuanced thing.
I feel like there is some of that, though, because we do get the Secret Wars in the 80s, and you have an older Spider-Man dealing with that, where he's starting to lose a step,
right?
Later and things like that. But it is it does deviate quite a bit with this kind of stuff.
So, and this is another point. So like here in the second issue of the story, Sue Richards has left Mr. Fantastic.
Yeah, for Namor.
For Namor, of all people. And at no point, I mean, she plays around with the idea in the regular FF series. Right. That's really not something that's ever going to happen. So to me, that just kind of cemented this as being, this is just completely a what if. It has, after the first issue, it only loosely ties to events in Spider-Man's life.
Right.
So I just... That just bothered me a little bit.
Well, I mean, I don't want it to just be a retelling of Spider-Man's life either.
Yeah.
You know,
but there should be, you kind of see the gravity of some of the situations, and since we know that it's a finite story, there, those individual events in my mind, can have a greater impact. Mm-hmm. So if they would have left the Gwen Stacy story alone, like here in the 70s, they could have let Green Goblin escape.
Right.
We had that big confrontation, and now this older, more mature Spider-Man is dealing with that death. And how that occurred, instead of let's just throw in these characters, change everything in the Marvel Universe, and not have enough space to actually tell that story.
Right. I mean, I feel like they probably did have to make edits. I feel like there was a pretty tight timeline they're probably working on. Like they don't show it in the book, but I'm going to bet Chip Zdarsky has notes of how this timeline plays out to keep everything straight. And I do get the impression there's probably more stuff they wanted to throw in here, but again, 6 issues. Now, having said that, Peter still loses Gwen Stacy at the end of this issue because you find out Warren was hired by Osborn to create clones
of him, of Osborn, of Peter Parker, and of Gwen Stacy, right? But
we find out the clones. It looks like the clones have died. Mm-hmm. Warren freaks out, saying that he has already replaced Gwen Stacy with the clone. So it's the original Gwen who has died.
Right.
The only one that survives is the Peter Parker clone that typically we know as Ben Reilly from regular Marvel continuity. So the Ben Reilly clone and Gwen Stacy clone take off.
Yeah. And this is, to me, this felt like out of character for Peter Parker. He'd been with this woman for 10 years maybe. Right. And he immediately just has nothing to do with her because the one that he hadn't been with for the last 10 years is dead. I
feel like, again, there's a time jump there at the very end where they're leaving, because now it says 1978, where before I think it was probably 77. 1977.
Okay.
So this is a year later, and then Gwen and Ben Reilly are leaving
together.
So again, it's something we're not shown, but I would imagine
there was the stress of the relationship.
There's some drama going on there in between.
See, those are the stories that I think they should have told in this.
Yeah.
Is how those events impacted
again,
Peter.
If this were a 12-issue series, I feel like we would have gotten some of that.
Well, and I don't know if I feel like I think some of the backstory would have been better than some of the story that we got. And then another thing, like in this issue, like they introduced new villains, well, quote unquote villains. You get like the Black Goblin.
Right.
It's like, why do we need the Black Goblin introduced in this story?
Right.
It's Harry Osborn. He could just be Harry Osborn, doing Green Goblin-y things. Why do we need to introduce this new villain? And we get several quote unquote new villains throughout the course of this series that. Again, it doesn't tie into the original stories. And like you said, I don't want the original stories either. I just want to see how Peter Parker would have reacted to those original stories.
So in the third chapter here, we've got the 80s.
The 80s. So the cover.
So nice.
So the cover, we've got the definite reference to Kraven's Last Hunt. We got a black suited Spider-Man in the coffin, and then at the top we have all the Soviet missiles coming down
on spiderwebs.
So we have the whole Cold War, Russia versus U.S. kind of is the backstory to this one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the story starts out with Mary Jane in the hospital, very far along in a pregnancy with Peter's twins, dealing with I'm assuming Alzheimer's-ridden Aunt May.
Yes.
And so this is really where the book kind of starts hitting it with Aunt May, and her, degeneration as she ages, and really kind of brings that up. But again, typical Spider-Man fashion, Peter Parker's not there because he's caught in the middle of the Secret Wars on the Battle World.
And to me, they tried to put a little bit too much into this. I really felt like that the time he was away, that could have just been when he was in the coffin, right, for the whole Kraven's Last Hunt storyline. And they could have omitted a lot of this stuff for Secret Wars. Now, of course, then how's he going to get the suit, right? Yeah. So I guess that's why they had to include this story.
I feel like, too, if he's not off the planet, it doesn't hit him as hard as it does when he gets back, where he's missed the birth of his children.
Well, he would still miss the birth either way.
Well, I feel like he can get himself out of a grave and run home real quick.
Yeah.
When he's off planet, like, what are you going to do kind of thing. I feel like it just heightens it that much more, having it, be Secret Wars is why he's not there. But again, he comes home now with the black suit.
So, yeah. And of course, it freaks Mary Jane out because she's never seen the black suit, and all of a sudden there's just somebody there. But I guess one of the back end parts of this one is that while they're gone to the Secret Wars, the Soviet Union actually fires missiles at the United States, and the Vision is able to divert the one that was headed for Manhattan, though it still hits in, I can't remember where it hit.
I want to say it was like, they say
like Pennsylvania or something.
Yeah, Allentown,
Pennsylvania. Okay, yeah. So and then something happens to the Vision, but what happened to the Vision? That never gets resolved.
Yeah.
It's just kind of talked about.
I don't think that's a major plot point. No. I think it just, it's the issue of now he's just standing there intangible and they don't know, is it because the explosions? Is it just he's broken? That's all he can do now, Yeah.
But it's not important to the story, really.
No.
But they spend several pages of Peter Parker going to Allentown and talking to Mr. Fantastic whenever they could have, had that conversation back in Manhattan and taken up a page instead of 3 or 4 pages, then move the story further along.
I feel like they're getting more into what's he doing now, and like, does he still need to be Spider-Man? With these accomplishments he's achieved scientifically, and working with Reed. I think again, just kind of showing how his life has changed.
But Reed and him do have the conversation about the fact that the symbiote is doing something to him beyond just giving him extra abilities. Yeah. So we kind of get the early hints of what will become Venom.
Yeah, and we have a copycat in a black suit going around killing criminals. Mm-hmm. It turns out it is Kraven.
It is Kraven, and they tie that to the Russian-U.S. war as part of the reason why Kraven is doing that.
Yeah, he thinks has cancer, and he thinks the world is running out of time at this point. But then we do have the black, suit symbiote, saving Spider-Man as he's buried alive.
Instead of Spider-Man saving himself, which is what he did in the original, if I remember right. Of course, it's been quite a while.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've read that.
Kraven's Last to Hunt.
But again, as he confronts Kraven now, it is very close to just straight up Venom. Peter Parker here too. Yeah.
He actually asked for Mary Jane. Basically, I assume he's asking Mary Jane to kill him at this point.
Well, he says previously that they do have a plan if something happens, and so it looks like she has like this sonic weapon.
Yeah, I guess it could have killed him.
Yeah, definitely. But I feel like it is just like they think the symbiote is gone now. The last page, we have the ending to Kraven's Last Hunt where he has the shotgun. Where Kraven has the shotgun. But we see the black symbiote swirl out of it at the last second, and everything goes dark.
Yeah. So
playing it to, Kraven merging with the symbiote.
Yeah. So instead of Eddie Brock, we're going to have Kraven. Yeah.
Eddie Brock isn't in here at any point, is he?
No. And that's another one of those things. It's like he should have been. I really felt like that should have been, something that they dealt with in this story, because that's one of the more popular Spider-Man storylines. It's like how would an aging Peter Parker deal with that situation, and we get a whole new story. So I'm not saying I disliked. Well, I don't want to spoil for a future issue, but I don't necessarily dislike. Well, I did dislike how that ended up being resolved, but that will be in later 6, right?
Yeah, that's the last issue.
Cover to 4. So we got Spider-Man on the side of I guess this is supposed to be the two towers. That's the 90s. So this is just on this.
This is just like a skyscraper looking at a reflection of himself, and one of the windows is cracked.
Right. Yeah, and the reflection is not perfect either.
No, and I feel like this is more an allusion to the Spider Clone Saga.
And I would agree
with 90s.
That. Yeah.
And again, because Ben Reilly does come back in here. And we do see Ben Reilly now, and it's 1995, and it looks like he is working as a reporter, as a photographer.
Well, okay, so probably should back up just a little bit. So some other events that were from the Spider-Man storyline, Otto Octavius and Aunt May actually do get married.
Yeah, that does happen.
And then, of course...
again, off-page.
Off-page, right, but it's discussed. It's discussed. It wasn't a broken-up marriage. However, later, she leaves... Aunt May leaves Otto, right? And of course that leads to some of the bitterness that Otto Octavius has whenever he comes back here in issue 4. So did they in the Secret Wars, they didn't really say which side he was fighting on in the Secret Wars, did they? Because he was there.
Oh, I can't remember.
Because they just really had like that one battle scene where you see Doc Ock there,
right?
But I don't remember which side he was on.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
So we have an aging Doc Ock though now, kind of
Yeah.
rampaging, and we have that's later. But yeah, and the other thing too is we're getting sort of a progression of suits for Spider-Man throughout the story too, as he gets older and he has more sort of armored costumes and things like that. And again, now he doesn't use the black suit anymore in the 90s. And so I wish I'm sure this is probably just all designed by Mark Bagley, but I wish we would have got suits that looked like they were more from the decades they were from. You know, like what the style of superhero costumes were in the 70s, 80s, 90s.
Yep. And again, I would definitely agree with that. So
yeah, because I feel like, I mean, they're not bad designs, but I feel like these could have been from any time, you know, and I feel like it would have worked better for the story.
I feel like a lot of the suit designs could have been 90s, even in the, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. They felt like 90s designs, you know, with the armor and the padding and there's a little bit
stuff. There's a little bit of continuity, I think, between maybe the 70s, what we see at the beginning of the 80s, but it doesn't look like a progression necessarily. It just looks like, you know, they all look like Spider-Man suits. Yeah. But you can't really track the evolution as you look at them.
Yeah, they feel like they jump around quite a bit.
Yeah. So Otto kidnaps Peter and Ben Reilly, and then Harry's there helping out. Otto tries to kill them. Harry jumps in front of one of Otto's legs and dies. We find out that who we've known as Peter Parker is the clone, and Ben Reilly is the original Peter. Like, was continuity there for a while in the 90s. And we do see here at the end Ben Reilly wearing the blue hoodie, and he has made himself a red Spider-Man mask without the webs, like the Scarlet Spider costume from the 90s. And Peter kind of walks away from everything and gives, you know, ownership of Parker Industries and everything. He basically gives Ben Reilly his life back.
Exactly, yeah.
And then Peter goes to see Norman Osborn, who is sort of hiding out now as an old man.
Faking senility after he gets out of prison, right?
And Peter says, I know you faked the test results. Peter is the original Peter Parker, but he just kind of did something nice for Ben Reilly is what it amounts to.
And he was looking for an out. He knows he's getting older. He was looking for an out. So he found an out.
Yeah. But this probably isn't the way anyone thought a Spider-Man Green Goblin rivalry would end, was with Norman just having a heart attack and dying there as an old man.
Yeah, I kept waiting for the Goblin glider to come flying in.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it was there. Yeah,
and
it was there.
Shoots at Peter, and he grabs it, but he crushes it this time. And then, you know, Peter rejoins Mary Jane and his estranged kids at the end of that one. So on to issue 5, the Aughts.
The Aughts. Yes.
We've got a nice sort of American flag with what seems to be a pool of, I'm assuming, blood.
Yeah, well, it's just anything that he's trying to. I'm not really for sure what this one's supposed to represent. Of course, you know, we obviously have 9/11, you know, as in the one of the major events from the 2000s, and that is dealt with at least in a few panels.
Yeah, here in the story. I think a lot of it looks like Captain America's suit, and so I think, you know, you've got Civil War going on, which is kind of alluded to here too. Again, it's sort of a different take on it. Okay, so now we're in 2006, and then Moreland shows up and kills Ben Reilly, Spider-Man. So Peter has to come out and say, I'm Peter Parker, because now Tony Stark has sort of...
Yeah, Tony Stark's had his eyes on Parker Industries for a long time. And Tony Stark now in this is completely still the weapons maker. That's how Stark Industries make their money. And of course now Peter Parker is the pacifist and doesn't want to sell out to Stark Industries, doesn't want to make weapons. He wants to do other types of tech. Yeah. And Stark has been trying to constantly buy his business. And now Peter comes forward. He comes forward primarily to prevent Tony Stark from buying his company.
Yeah, and Tony is Secretary of Defense at this point, too. He's the other part of that. The Superhero Registration Act has gone through. Yep. Most superheroes have fallen in line. The Registration Act is a thing.
Some of the same ones from the original Civil War storyline are still, they join Cap's side on the other side, because you still have, you know, Luke Cage and Daredevil and Cloak. I remember them all being on Cap's side during that.
And there is a quick reference to that they have just caught Daredevil. Found out he's a blind civil rights attorney, and Tony even says, let's hope that doesn't get out, because that would look very bad for their side. But again, we have a confrontation here with Spider-Man and Iron Man, and then Cap kind of shows up and helps out. But the other thing is Moreland has tracked down Spider-Man's family now. He's kind of been living out in a rural area somewhere, just sort of hiding from everything, trying to have a normal life.
Yeah, I guess, and I assume that he tracks them down because he can detect the children as being lesser spider totems than what Peter is. So he's hoping to draw Peter Parker back.
And I tell you what, I avoided all that Moreland spider totem stuff back when it was happening. I'm not really up on that, and I'm okay with that. It just sounds like a nightmare to me, especially after the Clone Saga. But
well, it turned into I don't know. It was kind of fun. That was the J. Michael Straczynski run. You had Ezekiel, who came in and kind of like a mentor to Peter Parker prior to warning him that Moreland was coming. They referenced that in the story as well. To me, Moreland was extremely powerful. Moreland defeated a Captain Universe empowered Spider-Man. So the fact that his two children were able to defeat him was kind of a little iffy to me as well. But again, they got to move the story along, so we don't get as much there as what we should. At least that's my take. Yeah. But I guess that's important for later on whenever somebody else has to take over the mantle for Spider-Man. So they are capable of doing that.
So the story, this issue ends with Spider-Man kind of leaving with Cap and their rebels. Mm-hmm. And then we have issue 6, which is the teens.
Yep. And here, I guess it's just supposed to be Spider-Man in space. I guess is what, or is that actually the costume? Is it just the costumes? He's not even in the costume, is he?
No, the costumes. I guess felt more like Spider-Man No More to me.
Mm-hmm, okay.
But again, just a real dark black cover as opposed to the other sort of monochromatic, real bright covers that we've had throughout the series. So yeah, now we are in 2019. So yeah. Really jumping ahead, and the beginning of this issue, Peter is telling Mary Jane he keeps dreaming about the robber that got away that killed Uncle Ben. But we have a Peter Parker who's starting to look like Uncle Ben now too. He's aged so much. So we start with Peter and now Miles Morales, who is also part of this, going off into space to fight. Sort of sabotage some of Dr. Doom's.
Yeah, 'cause I guess after the Civil War, Doom is able to get a little bit of a stranglehold on. People are looking for somebody to give them some semblant of normalcy, and Doom is who they flock to for some reason. So yeah, they're trying to undo Doom's control over the planet.
Having said that, we don't really get into that in this.
No.
If that were a big crossover, this is a tie-in issue to that. It's kind of how this plays out.
It kind of felt like, to me, a little bit of a reference to the later Secret Wars, because in that one, Doom steals the power of the Beyonder.
Right.
But Doom's not at that power level in this story. But it kind of, I took it as a pseudo reference to that because otherwise, this story does not take place. It's not like you can tie this to any other Spider-Man story. This is a completely new.
Well,
Spider-Man
I feel like you
story.
can tie it in a little bit to the Superior Spider-Man.
Well, the part with Miles, but not the whole outer space thing.
Yeah,
yes,
no.
Yes.
But they're cramming a lot into this issue too, and I think they're trying to kind of get a few different things in here. So they have to go to this space station for their mission, and out jumps Venom, which is Kraven.
Venom. Yeah, he's even got the little lion vest. Yeah,
so it's a very hairy Venom. I don't know. I kind of like that mashup design of it.
Yeah. But it kind of feels like those
I don't
Infinity Warps to me is what it feels like. Yeah.
But I don't know how I'd feel about if this were just Venom.
Yeah.
Which is all we really get in this story. So Peter and Miles have to fight Kraven Venom.
Right.
Then Parker reveals that he knows Miles is actually Doc Ock.
Yeah, well, I do like how they show whenever they defeat Kraven Venom that after the symbiote is apparently destroyed, that Kraven is actually just bones. He's there. He's not actually even there anymore. So it's just his skeleton on the inside.
Yeah, because even in the 80s, he's starting to look pretty old.
Yeah.
And so, you would assume it's just a symbiote in control at that point. So kind of combining the Superior Spider-Man story and then bringing in Miles Morales. We have Otto has taken control of Miles' body like he did with Peter's in the regular continuity.
Yeah, and this to me made sense because an old Otto wouldn't want to get an old Peter Parker's body, so he goes after the young Spider-Man's body. So I thought that was actually a good switch over and a nice surprise for me in this last issue.
Yeah, because I read Superior Spider-Man, what was going on.
Oh, and I loved Superior Spider-Man.
I wasn't even thinking about that when I read this, though, because, again, they've strayed so far. But so we get a pretty big fight scene here for a few pages, sort of in Peter's mind, where Ock is with all these other sort of classic villains, and like, how are you going to defeat all of us? Well, it's all these different versions of Spider-Man we've seen throughout the book now. Peter in his various costumes.
Yeah, versus basically the Sinister Six.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the most part with Venom, so.
And then.
Yeah, but what actually saves the day?
Exactly. Aunt May.
Aunt May saves the day. So, and I guess we should mention she passed away several issues ago. So a couple of issues ago.
So and just just sort of letting Otto know it's okay to move on, that kind of thing. But here, especially this page here with Peter, aged Peter talking to Aunt May, he really looks like Ben here.
Yeah,
and
I'm sure that's what they were going for.
Yeah,
absolutely what they were going for. So.
So then, back to the space station, everything's falling apart. There's one escape pod.
Right.
So Peter throws Miles in it and lets him go.
Yep. Peter's trying to hold it together. It's like the boat scene in Homecoming, where he's trying to hold the boat together, and he runs out of web fluid and he can't hold the space station together anymore.
Yeah, he has to hold the entire space station together now.
So who saves the day?
The symbiote comes in and patches the large hole, but they sent out the signal, which was their mission, and then the space station explodes. So we actually have a death of Peter Parker at the end of this story, and then Miles visiting Doc Ock. But
you don't see Peter die, so the symbiote could have saved him.
If they do a sequel to this and Peter survives, no. I'm taking this as, for this continuity, this is how Peter dies.
And I
feel like
too,
it's a good ending to the story.
But they don't show it. And if Marvel can decide that they can make some money off of six issues of decrepit Peter Parker.
You were saying you felt this story was overhyped. I feel like Marvel didn't hype this up enough. I feel like...
I feel like I agree with you that Marvel didn't hype it, but from
word of
mouth on this book was that it was just so good, and like that there were scenes that were so incredibly touching and people crying, and I'm like, that it didn't do it for me.
Yeah.
It did not do that for me. So
at the end here we have Peter's dream again of the robber going by, but now he stops him, is what's implied here, and he has saved Uncle Ben, which alluded throughout the story that's what he's been trying to do since the beginning. Is making up for this mistake, with his great responsibility. I thought it was a really good ending.
Yeah, and then and then right before that, they pass. I mean, there's like the formal pass into the mantle over to Miles Morales as well. Yeah.
So there's still a Spider-Man out there. You could always do Miles. Life.
Well, I mean, maybe they did Life Story 2, where Peter comes back for his first decade, and he's the mentor to Miles Morales, and then he passes.
Right.
But no, I don't. To me, there was too many gaps. They didn't give enough time to some of the things that they should have given more time to. They deviated too much from the original stories. Once you get past the first issue, it's just, shows that, here's where we're trying to tie it into this decade. But I didn't feel like it really tied it in very well. So I was a little bit of a letdown for me. I'm still glad I read it. I haven't really read a whole lot of Chip Zdarsky. I know I should have read Marvel 2-in-1 by now.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's the book that I think most people say when you want to read good Chip Zdarsky, that's what you should read. I will probably still read that at some point in the future. But this doesn't make me feel like I gotta go rush out and read Marvel 2-in-1 right now because this was so good. I felt like there was just way too many holes in this story for me. So
I feel like I'll agree with that, but I feel like it is due to the format of the book, of the X amount of pages per issue. We're going in a decade an issue. Again, it really kind of kills any kind of cliffhanger you're going to do, even when it looks like there is one. I really enjoyed it. It's very reminiscent of the John Byrne series Superman Batman Generations.
And I have not read that.
It's a similar format. It is by decade, and it is Superman Batman starting in 1938.
But don't they do like 4 issues per decade for that series for Generations? Or am I? They did multiple Generations.
Multiple series.
That's right.
There were about 3 or 4 maybe miniseries they did where they kind of go all over the place. They're all good. The first is really strong. And it's sort of the same thing where they age in real time. Like Alfred dies in the 60s, I think, and stuff like that. So, but it deals with legacy a lot too. Like Batman dies, Robin becomes the new Batman, and that sort of. Then Superman has kids, and that story. The later series went all over the place. They go into the future with Superman's descendants and Batman's descendants and things like that. So they really just kind of let John Byrne run wild for a while with that series.
Well, it's basically an Elseworlds story,
it was,
so it doesn't really matter.
It was an Elseworlds. It was his own kind of little corner he had there for a while, and there was some really good stories. But again, it's a similar format to this. So if you like Life Story, maybe check those out too. Or if you like those, check out Life Story.
Yeah.
You know,
I feel like they should have focused there. I guess it's weird to say, but there wasn't enough focus on Peter Parker. I think in Life Story, there was too much bringing in extra characters, taking away pages from what should have been Peter Parker's story.
I feel like you could say that about Spider-Man books in general.
Well, but I mean, maybe that's a problem why we have so many stinking Spider-Man books on the shelves. And it's that's one of the problems I think in the comic book industry is there's just too many books right now.
Yeah. I mean, Spider-Man's always had a really strong supporting cast.
Oh,
too.
Yeah.
You know,
but this one should have really emphasized Peter Parker more. It's about Peter Parker aging, so we should have had, it should have had more focus on him. So like I would have given it like a fine, grade. I wasn't, I didn't dislike it, but it's not something I'm like, ready to read again. I may read it again at some point in the future, but. Right. If I don't get around to it, I don't think it's any big loss.
I'll go very fine with it. I really enjoyed the story. I could see going back to it. There's not a lot of Marvel stuff I will. I think, the big thing is Marvel doesn't have that Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns kind of story,
right.
That they keep in print forever. You could just throw at somebody. Again, another reason I feel like they didn't hype this story up enough, because getting this book monthly as it was coming out, people were coming to the store. I'm like, oh yeah, you're getting Spider-Man, check this out. And then they're like, oh, I hadn't heard of that. Why haven't you heard of this? The way Marvel hypes everything else. You know what I mean?
Every single 50-issue crossover.
Yeah, I know. But this one self-contained miniseries flies under the radar somehow. Again, that's talking about a Marvel Spider-Man book flying under the radar. Yeah. But, so I reread this getting ready for the podcast. And so I decided, as I was reading, to turn on a YouTube mix of music from each decade for every issue. Turns out, so the 90s, the first video that came up was November Rain by Guns N' Roses. Turns out it takes exactly the same amount of time to read this issue as it does to watch the video for November Rain. So time that out if you want.
There you go. So that you have like the November Rain Life Story. You should put like a mix together.
I should.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I was thinking about it afterwards because it's like I was just random 80s, 90s videos and stuff coming up. You really need one that's catered more towards what's going on in the story.
Yep.
But yeah, that's be a good playlist to put together.
Of course, all you slow readers need not apply.
Yeah.
So our recording of episode 52 was cut short. So we did not get to finish up our conversation about the Boys Amazon series. We will continue that conversation at a later date, as well as the conversation we plan to have on a Batman recommendation. We were hoping to get that Batman book recommendation in time for Batman Day, which is, of course, Saturday, September 21st, this coming Saturday. So I did want to let you know about some information, some things that are going to be happening at Campus Comics on Batman Day. So first off, there's going to be several specials in store, including all trade paperbacks and hardcovers are going to be 30% off. Story bundles are going to be 50% off. The dollar comics are going to be marked down to 50 cents a piece. Most of the statues that are in stock are going to be 20% off. New arrivals are excluded from that sale price. And then all variant cover comics are going to be 50% off whatever the price is marked on the book. In addition to that, there's going to be several artists in the shop. Joe Dodd, Justin Holman, David Clark, and Matt Sparodi are all going to be present doing sketches, having prints to sale. And then local writer Jason Nugent's also going to be on hand with his books. And then there are going to be several cosplayers in the store, including Batman, the Batman Who Laughs, Harley Quinn, and Alfred. So we hope that you will find the time to come out to Campus Comics on Saturday, September 21st, and take advantage of some of those sales and meet some of the artists and writers, and of course get your picture taken with some of the cosplayers. So we will see you on Saturday, September 21st.